Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down 28 years later. After what felt like a gap of 28 years, we are finally back in this rage-filled world. Throughout this video, we'll be discussing everything within it and pointing out all the Easter eggs and things you might have missed. I'm also lucky enough, or unlucky enough, as you could say, to live around the area, so we'll be visiting a lot of the locations from the movie. This is going to be pointing out stuff from a local perspective and definitely picking up some stuff that you might not know. I was actually surprised at how Geordie the movie was, and it was amazing seeing the places I grew up with appearing on screen. So I've travelled out to a lot of the sites from the film to discuss the legacy and history behind this journey. So come with me as we break down the film and talk about everything within it.
Very nice.
Previously on the 28 Days Later series.
It's been 84 years.
Now, the reason for this was because the film was pretty much in development hell. Weeks had been pretty successful, with it making $72 million off a $50 million budget. It also did fantastic on home video, and people were queuing upside their blockbusters to pick it up. Never going out of business. Boyle announced the third film had been mapped out and that they were getting ready to go. However, come 2010, nothing had happened. Due to the rights, Garland said the project was being delayed. By 2013, Boyle said he didn't think it was ever coming, and in 2015, fans had lost hope. However, Garland also said he'd been working on the script for 28 months later. Though details on that are sketchy, we do have a rough idea about what was going to happen. Imogen Poote would reprise her role, and we'd see the virus ravaging Europe. Beyond that, we'd also have the return of Cillian Murphy. Yes, Jim was back, and the film would pick up in Russia, with this being where humanity was fighting back from. As we know though, that was scrapped and they came up with a new plan. Months was then changed to years, as a little joke for how long the movie took to make. Come January 2024, they announced it was in development, as they'd finally got back the rights from Searchlight Pictures. Announced as heavily influenced by the movie Cares, we'd watch a small community living life in this world. This video is sponsored by Huel. This is now part of my daily routine, and their great tasting, complete meals are a must-have if you're trying to get a big dose of essential vitamins and minerals. I absolutely love Huel, and a black edition is the way I start my day. Every day. Doesn't matter what I could be covering that day, mate. I could be doing a horror movie where I need to drive out to Holy Island, or it could be pretending I'm James Bond for the 50th time that week. Either way, Huel is what gets me through, and I've seen a massive improvement in my energy over the last couple of months. Each shake delivers a balanced blend of carbs, fats, and 40 grams of plant-based protein, plus 6 grams of fiber and 27 essential vitamins and minerals, all for just 400 calories. Amongst these are also vitamin C to reduce tiredness and fatigue. It's also packed with calcium, which helps your bones and digestive system. Whether it's a high protein breakfast, lunch, or a post-workout refuel, it's complete nutrition made for your busiest days. Right now, as well, if you use my code in the description or scan the QR code on screen, you're going to get 15% off. Beyond Black Edition, they also do ready-to-drink bottles, hot meals, daily greens, nutrition bars, and more. They've got you covered morning, lunch, dinner, and a snack, which are just perfect for your entire day. Definitely check out the Cookies and Cream Black Edition as well, which is my favourite. That code is Heavy15, so just go to my link in the description, use the code Heavy15 and get 15% off. I really stand by this stuff, and I think you'll love it as well, so yeah, definitely check out that offer. Thank you. Anyway, we begin 28 years ago with the outbreak in 2002. If you cast your mind back to when Selena met Jim, she told him of how the virus spread. Initially, it happened in the cities, and people thought it was right. However, when it spread to the villages, they realized that wasn't really typical behavior. Something was severely wrong, and we witnessed an attack like this firsthand. It's at this point we meet Jimmy, and we see the characters several decades later at the end of the movie. Where we begin, though, is with the Teletubbies, with this obviously being a symbol of innocence. It perfectly juxtaposes the violence that will follow, and little Jimmy has to grow up quick. The opening of Teletubbies also begins with
Over the hills and far away.
And we often see the infected coming from over a hill. We also have a focus on the sun, which is what Spike sees when he puts his mother to rest. I don't think it's any coincidence that all these kids are blonde as well, and that's what the gang look like later. Children being thrust into this world and seeing how they deal with it is of course a major theme in the movie as well. Both are sort of led along the path by their fathers, but in both instances, they turn against this figure. As we see, Jimmy's dad's a local priest who believes the virus is a biblical event. This sort of builds off the note in the first film which Jim found when moving through London. He of course then went to the church and came across an infected priest. So brings things full circle from that. Jim even called the figure Father. Priests are of course also called father, but for Jimmy it's literal. He decides to turn away from his dad, which is something that Spike later does as well. Who is really trying to aid the children in both circumstances is the mother, and we see she's here trying to protect the kids. Either way, the Teletubbies are bright and colourful, they work in a gang, and in a way, may have inspired the gang we see later. When I say work in, they don't work in a gang, the Teletubbies. Oh shit, they're here! His get-ups, of course, also heavily inspired by Jimmy Savile, who's notorious in the UK. He committed several heinous crimes, was covered up by a lot of people in power, but before this was discovered, he was a beloved children's figure, at one point at least. Several TV shows, documentaries and radio stations, they gave him a platform and covered for his abuse. Though he was once a figure who represented childhood, he now also represents innocence lost. The horrors he committed vastly changed our perception, and now you look back on his work with a completely different view. However, in this world at least, Savile was never exposed. So you can see how kids will continue to look up to him and how someone like Jimmy would take on his look. However, there's also the possibility that with this gang taking him under their wing, it's further representing innocence lost. Like the last thing you want to see as a parent is your kid go off with Jimmy Savile. So whether they're bad or not, we're going to have to see, but yeah, it's a very big cliffhanger. When doing these videos as well, you know, obviously we wear costumes, and like for this one I was like, either the dad, the alpha, or dress up as Jimmy Savile. So yeah, not many options there, and I was actually surprised they still sell Jimmy Savile costumes. Either way, I think the major point the movie's pushing is how appearances can be deceiving. This has been something laced throughout the franchise, with the first film having the soldiers that were worse than the infected. It was initially thought they would protect and serve, but they turned out to have ulterior motives. Don also seemed like a great husband and father, but he abandoned his wife and then went after his kids. He was also the person though who showed the infected might possess some intelligence, which kind of showed that appearances could be deceiving. This idea is also mirrored in Ray Fiennes' character Dr. Kelson. Kelson seems insane and we're told he's a dangerous guy. However, he seems like a nice dude that always hits the thumbs up and always subscribes. The islanders though, they lock themselves away as they believe that's the best way to survive. However, the others we meet highlight you can make a life on the mainland, and this is what Spike ultimately accepts. We also have Jimmy's dad, who's a pillar of the community, but almost gets his son killed by infected. Jimmy somewhat gets the others killed as well, as he's the one who alerts the infected. He was told to sit down and watch TV, but instead went to the door. Him speaking is what alerts them, and he says dad, playing into the themes of the film. Also, I love how we hear like the Teletubby uh-oh as it all kicks off. As things start to ramp up, we also see lots of religious imagery along the way. We have a crucifix on the windowsill, and then he runs to the church. Catching his dad praying, there's also a crucifix shadow on the floor. This is upside down, which is how Jimmy later wears the crucifix around his neck. This comes from his dad, who says,
"Keep this with you always."
Historically, an upside-down crucifix, that was associated with St. Peter, who was crucified upside down. This was supposed to represent martyrdom, however, since then, it's taken on a different meaning. An upside-down cross tends to represent an opposite to Christianity, and it's sometimes thought to be a symbol of Satan. Jimmy also hangs his victims upside down, and it plays into that notion. Seeing what Jimmy's dad wants to do, you could also see him as being corrupted by evil. We then get our first Matrix bullet time effect. Several of these shots appear throughout the film, and they were done through using a circular rig. Several iPhones were then lined along it, and they basically cut between them and gave this amazing 360 shot look. We tried filming on iPhone there, but it looks shit. I said it looked shit. This kind of also follows the style of the first film, where it was shot through using early DVs. This was done because they were an emerging technology and what people were using to make home videos at the time with. These days, we of course all have iPhones, so it makes sense to use a contemporary camera to carry on that tradition. Jimmy then asks what's happening. His dad says that it's what was foretold in the rapture. He says the infected aren't dead, but rather they're saved. Has to be said that technically they aren't dead and they're more than your typical zombie. These people are simply just infected. Now, in our first breakdown of the movie, as I said zombie was a catch-all term that we'd use when talking about the creatures. I still used infected pretty much 99% of the time, but I got loads of shit for saying it, mate. So when they said zombie in this movie, I was fucking loving it.
It's a baby! It's a fucking zombie baby!
Take that, Loves to Spooge 69.
Fucking zombie baby!
Take that, James Goon. Zombie baby! They used the word zombie. It's canon. Either way, to his father, this is Judgment Day and a time of celebration. Even when the dad's infected, he's almost lifted in the air and it sounds like he's saying yes. He then leads his congregation and goes off to spread the word. The music in this section isn't sad or intense either, but it's almost euphoric. It evokes a feeling of ascension, and the band who wrote the soundtrack are actually called the Young Father, which is either a crazy coincidence or playing into the themes of the movie. Spike in a way becomes a young father later on, or at least takes on that father figure role in the family. He looks after his mum and then later takes care of the baby. His mum also talks about her own dad and how important he was in her life. When the trailer first dropped, I thought it was going to be your kind of over-the-top zombie thing where everyone's constantly on the run and shooting people with arrows. The film's much deeper than that though, and there's lots of themes that are tied to family. The idea of fathers also plays into what Jimmy says when he's hiding. He asks,
Father, why have you forsaken me?
This has a double meaning, as father of course means God. However, it could play on how his own dad's forsaken him. That upside down cross could represent an affront to God and also the priest's father that almost got him killed. To him, he would have been an infected rage monster who may have even chased him after this moment. We see him running into the forest with the upside down cross in his hand, and fathers coming after their children is something that's laced throughout these films. Frank almost did it with Hannah in the first one, and the second film opened with a kid arriving at the farm talking about how his parents had turned infected and chased him through the fields. We of course also had Don, who was constantly on the tail of his kids. But Jimmy gets away, and we then have a recap of the previous films. We discover that at the end of 28 weeks that Europe actually defeated the virus. They managed to push it back to Britain, and I'm guessing that they closed off the Channel Tunnel. Or Chunnel as we call it around here. Because of that though, it sort of makes weeks feel a bit pointless, and there's theories the creative team just wanted to retcon the whole thing. Either way, Britain's now cut off from the rest of the world, and we've all been left to fend for ourselves. Due to this, many people have drawn parallels to Brexit, in which the UK voted to leave the EU. Now this was obviously by choice, whereas here the isolation's forced. We then have the location of Holy Island, which in itself is a small part of land off the coast of the mainland. So you have an isolated island with another isolated island attached to it. Throughout, Spike's desperate to go to the mainland and reach out to a doctor who can help his mother. To me, this represents those that want to reconnect with the rest of the world and move beyond the choices they've inherited. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen, and I'd of course love to hear you read on the meaning, because there's no right answers. Anyway, it's here that we jump to Lindisfarne, aka Holy Island. We see a torn and battered St. George's cross flag, and though England's gone, it highlights the people are still holding on. Now, look, I'm not saying that Danny Boyle stole an idea from my head, mate. I'm not saying that, but I remember right when I was a kid, and I was thinking this would literally be the perfect place to have a zombie movie. Like, the film explains the causeway to get there and back, which is just a great natural defense. And even today's shoot, we kind of had to plan around when the tide was out. There's actually been several deaths when people have set out during the tide and they've been swept up in the current and then taken out to sea. So it was the perfect setting, and hearing we get a film here, it really caught my interest. The name Holy Island, of course, also builds off the religious themes, and it basically acts as a sanctuary to the survivors. I'm going to read off some facts for you here. The island was founded in 635 AD. King Oswald, he established a monastery where they then spread Christianity. Home to develop art, shrines, and also the church, it actually ended up having its own issues. During 793, Vikings raided the area. This then marked the beginning of their rule in the country. I think you could even see the Alphas as Viking-like figures who planned to bring their way of life to the island. Seizing this was also extremely important, as the causeway gave it lots of strategic defenses. The tide allowed the island inhabitants to halt invaders and let Mother Nature do most of the work for them. Beyond that, there was also Lindisfarne Castle, which was garrisoned and fortified. These same tactics are used as the defenses that we see in the movie, with them having lots of different medieval weaponry. While being cut off has allowed them to survive, it's also something that's sort of limited the community. There's loads of signs saying take only what you need, and they're obviously low on resources. Even things like Spike's boots, you might notice they're an adult size rather than being for a kid. With Boyle also touching upon Brexit, I did wonder if this was basically them commenting on the trade issues. It also seems like a sort of anarcho-communist society like Jackson and The Last of Us. Alex Garland and Neil Druckmann have cited each other as influences on their work, so this might be part of that feedback loop. The Last of Us could also be the template for the opening part of the film, as we have a father and child making their way through the infected mainland. The dad is also selfish and kinda wants things for himself.
Yes.
It's during this that we meet Spike, who's played by Alfie Williams. Absolutely phenomenal actor, and he does an incredible job carrying the movie. You can see drawings of infected and arrows in Spike's room, which shows kids are taught about them from a young age. The fact you have arrows as well also highlights they've been shown how to kill them. Across the island we see targets and archery ranges which highlight how the kids are trained to kill. The fact that this is on a kid's drawing further emphasizes that idea of the loss of innocence. The top drawing of the infected also somewhat resembles the shot we see later of the infected coming over the hill. This was used heavily throughout the marketing, with it constantly appearing in the character posters. We also have it sort of playing off the opening of Weeks, where the infected came over the hill when chasing Don. Spike almost takes the Power Ranger toy with him, but instead decides to leave it behind. This taps into the coming of age themes and may foreshadow Jimmy's gang at the end. They arrive like Power Rangers themselves and basically play things out like the show. Spike leaves it here though, because to him he's no longer a child. We then get another close-up of the infected drawing. This one very much resembles the alphas we see throughout the movie. I do wonder if they're taught about them as well, and you could kind of see how they're like a boogeyman type figure. Bogeyman, not boogeyman, they're not dancing. Spike then gets bacon with his breakfast, which is of course a luxury. However, it's the character's birthday, and though they're low on resources, this is a very special day. Spike saves a piece for his mum despite Jamie insisting it's just for him. This is an early example of how Jamie's given up on her, but Spike still has hope. In the end, his mother doesn't eat it, and we see as it's still there the next day. Kinda shows how no matter how much Spike tries to help, it serves to be fruitless. This naivety and loss of innocence comes full circle in the end, as the character has to accept her death. You might also notice the anchor on the mantelpiece. This does resemble a crucifix though, and kinda builds off the one on the windowsill before. It's here that we get our first introduction of Isla, who's shown shoving stuff off her table. Definitely feels like it's a play on the notion of how the infected act, and how like them, she is slowly losing herself. Isla is basically locked away, and sort of out of sight, out of mind. Isla also means island, so it's a fitting name for this isolated character. The islanders don't have a doctor to help her, but they also don't deal with the infection. It's akin to Boyle's film The Beach, where we had a character attacked by a shock. Rather than taking him to a doctor or getting him help, they just put him out of sight in a tent. With him away like this, they didn't have to deal with it, and that's sort of what it feels like here. Jodie Comer does a fantastic job as well, and she's an absolute expert with the accents, which I'm sure you've seen on Killing Eve, but yeah, she does a better Jodie accent than me. Better than me, that, like. Even the dialogue is bang on as well, such as stuff like this.
You crazy fucking sick baby murderer!
Like, that's exactly what a Jodie would say. As we learn, the character has cancer, and this has infected her brain. She's having memory lapses, becoming immobile, and slowly losing herself to the disease. Without any advanced medical technology, they're also unable to save her. It just leads to a really sad film in which no one can really help her. Jamie also stops to collect himself before heading upstairs, and this is highly significant. It shows how he's struggling with that caretaker role, and how he has to compose himself and put on an act. He's trying to appear like a loving husband, but to him it's over, and he's already got his eyes on another woman. Spike lies and then says he's going back to school, but also he kind of is, as he's beginning his journey into adulthood by learning these survival lessons firsthand.
Oh, then, son, let's go.
Which, yeah, any Geordie knows how son, how
Aye, aye.
As they head out, we get loads of big water bottles showing how they potentially collect rainwater. This is something Frank attempted in the first film, though it failed there due to how much of a drought there was. Everyone then wishes Spike good luck as he heads out. Rather than seeming like a scavenging mission, Spike's going out purely to kill an infected. Typically, this is called blooding, in which a first hunt and kill is seen as a rite of passage. Slowly, Spike starts to reject this though, and eventually he turns away from his home. The island definitely has this weird cultural fixation with killing the infected, which is seen with their weird mask rituals. These masks have blood dripping from the eyes, which is something that the infected also share. This is why they're later used on the archery targets. The mask usage here is to celebrate Spike coming of age and how he must tackle this beast on the mainland. Masks also represent hiding away and not revealing oneself to the world. This is a mentality of the island, which is hidden away from the rest of the country. We then see food being grown and an outdoor shower asking people not to take too long. It not only shows how tight their resources are, but you also give a pass to Jamie for going down to trim the rose bush. I think it is weird though how we keep getting reminded of how low their resources are, but they're just going out to kill an infected and not collect anything. It's almost like the island are more bothered about keeping in place its traditions rather than living within their means. Like they'd rather throw a big party than ration things off properly. Upon reaching the gate, we then see the gravestones, which are denoted by crucifixes. It highlights how many die going to the mainland and how it's not an easy journey. Another thing you might notice is how close these gravestones are to each other. Like clearly there's no bodies buried underneath them. The virus obviously spreads so fast that you wouldn't have someone come back and die due to an infection. So these people were likely killed on the mainland or left upon being infected and simply thought of as dead. It's here though that we meet Jenny, who's clearly one of the leaders. She mentions how Spike's a bit young to be going out and usually they send 14 to 15-year-olds. However, Jamie insists he's ready. Due to his mother's illness, it's possible that Spike's been forced to grow up much faster than the rest of the kids. He takes on the caregiver role with his mother and this is seen throughout. First it's with the bacon and later on with the journey. I know kids who had ill or disabled parents and they often had to grow up really fast and basically become young carers from a very, very young age. They were just thrust into adulthood. She also says how you can leave, but if you don't come back, no one's coming after you. There's no rescue parties and no one's permitted to leave, which kind of explains why Jamie's reluctant to go after him. But yeah, I think the dad in me knows you still would. This once more plays into the themes of isolation though, and how the island cuts itself off from everything else, including the people that are from there. It also sets up the stakes for when Spike heads out later. He's on his own and needs to be capable of looking after himself. We also get some of the names on the graves. One of them says Nick Egan, who's a British music video director. He has credits for Duran Duran and also Oasis. It's also possible this is playing off Negan, who is of course a character in another zombie franchise. At this point, we then hear Boots by Rudyard Kipling. Written in 1903, this recording we hear is from 1915. Performed by Taylor Holmes, this is what was used as the backing for the trailer. And best trailer of all time. Written from the perspective of a British soldier, it chronicles them marching into South Africa in the Boer War. Its use here draws a parallel to entering the mainland, which is just as dangerous a war zone. The poem's repetitive and monotonous because it's supposed to reflect a soldier's mind state. They're becoming like an unfeeling machine, which is what you need to be in this wasteland. But there's definitely a feeling of madness to it as well. You kind of feel like everyone's on the verge of having a mental breakdown, which is sort of what the poem enforces. British war footage is also coupled with this to emphasize how they're like soldiers heading into no man's land. The editing here is masterful and they use several clips from lots of different things. We see children marching, which is a direct line drawn between the children sent out to war and Spike going to the mainland. Children doing this was to turn them into soldiers and hammer home, say it with me, the idea of loss of innocence. We also have footage of archers shooting down from a tower. I believe this is from Henry V, which starred Laurence Olivier. This is then paired with a sniper shots from 28 Weeks. It highlights how part of survival has always involved war and how boys have to take up their duty and become men to defend their homes. Jamie asks Spike if he wants to go back, but Spike says if they do, people will think they're soft. Jamie loves this and is clearly very happy. He's kind of forcing his son into this adult role, but also proud that he's ready to embrace it. You might also notice there's a chemtrail in the air, which kind of builds off the fact that planes still surveil the UK. Just getting a shot lined up. Just practicing if any infected come out here, you know, got to keep your aim up. Yeah, it's a good shot that, good shot that. So the next part I want to talk about is basically the causeway. Now, not to get like, actually, because obviously I'm a survival expert, but they do change up the geography of the land. There isn't a massive forest lining the coastline, and even getting there, it's not just a straight line back and forth. These forest sections are actually filmed in Kielder, which is actually 66 miles away. Now, throughout the forest, we can see tree stumps and inserts of men and boys working on a lumber farm. Jamie tells Spike he'll work there one day, and this is how they get their fuel. Wood can of course be burned, and it's likely used to create their fires now that they don't have access to gas. Spike mentions other villages as well, and Jamie asserts, just don't go any. They have nothing they don't have on Holy Island, and it's best to isolate yourself off. Jamie clearly doesn't trust outsiders, which we see later with the Doctor. I think though that you'd need to learn to trade and get new things, and that includes some brand new clothes for yourself. Why don't you check out our new 28 years inspired shirt, which you can find on the merch store below. This has the skulls from the Bone Temple laid out in that famous biohazard symbol. Beyond that, we've also just launched our brand new Predator shirt along with our Xenomorph Vitruvian Man one. If you love James Bond as well, yeah, we've got the Akira inspired one, and if you buy 3, you get 20% off. So do it now! Now, coupled with this, we also have inserts of the infected. Shot with a red filter, it exemplifies the rage they feel. This red was also used on the posters for the first 2 films, and red is of course associated with rage. Beyond that, it also feels like Boyle's riffing off the night vision used in Weeks. It's even been theorized that these red shots are in fact the night vision goggles of the soldiers. From my research, I found that some early night vision goggles had a red filter, and infrared, yeah, it's got red in it. Whether that's the case or not, I just love the way it looks, and I feel like it shows the embodiment of rage. This could be why Spike later sees his mother drowning with his filter applied over it. She's there calling for help as she's drowning, but no one's going to her aid. Kinda like the same thing with the virus. We also have just her head popping out the water, which is symbolic as her skull's later put on the monument. Now from here, we get our first shot of the slow-low infected. Due to the closeness to The Last of Us, I did wonder if these were inspired by the bloaters. They're sort of our first indication though of how the virus is mutated. When discussing the film, Boyle said that initially it started off as something that basically threw the infected into a frenzy. This overheated their nervous system and had them constantly turn up to 11. However, a virus's goal is to survive and spread to others rather than killing its host. If it did this, it would wipe itself out, and that's normally why viruses tend to get less deadly. Things like the Black Plague, Spanish flu, they all mutated over time to be less deadly to the infected. The infected, though, they initially died of starvation because they just went wild. Now, though, they need to retain some intelligence, which is what we saw the bare bones of in Weeks. Their Don would avoid missile strikes and even show restraint when stalking his kids. Nowadays, though, they're able to hunt and act in a way that sustains themselves. The fat ones use very little energy and crawl on the ground scavenging worms. Jamie also says that you need to fire at the neck, which does kind of suggest that the chest is too thick. That might be either due to bloating or they're armored to a degree due to them having to live in this environment. According to the wiki, they suffer from tissue engorgement, which bloats up their insides. They're also usually bald and hairless, which might be a side effect of what's going on inside their body. Now here, we also get a shot of a crow. Symbolically, crows are linked to death, and we saw right before Frank turned. Throughout the film, we also often see birds right before the characters are in danger from the infected. This isn't always the case, but it's enough to be significant. When the slow-low gets hit, it then stands up, as does the other one who's creeping up on them. This shows that they can walk, but generally don't want to, which is potentially to conserve energy. There's also a child which looks at Jamie as he hesitates. It almost sobs and has potentially just watched its family die. It then runs away, further showing how they're able to think strategically. They're now more than just mindless aggression. Spike seems conflicted about his first kill though. He says it feels good when he's prompted by Jamie, but it's clear he doesn't know how to feel. This is an early example of Jamie neglecting Spike's feelings and just kind of forcing him into this life. They then encounter a massive herd of deer. The wild animal population has clearly ballooned without humans there, and the scene also reminds me of the horse scene from 28 Days Later. That highlighted how the world had continued and flourished in our absence. They then enter the house and find the body of Jimmy's victim. Jamie insists Spike doesn't look away, as there's a lesson for you here. To him, he has to witness the violence of the world firsthand, and you could say it's a loss of innocence.
There's a lesson for you here.
See, I nailed that impression. As we see, the body was tied up and left for the infected. It's also possible that Jimmy did this due to what his father said at the start. By infecting people, they get to ascend to heaven, so perhaps Jimmy does this as a sort of religious figure. This would also tie in with his inverted crucifix. Jamie suggests they were left there as punishment, and perhaps Jimmy punishes those for their sins. He may have even been a part of their group. Jamie then says how the more you kill, the easier that it gets. In this world, adulthood is tied to violence, and you grow by killing and mature by being okay with it. It's pretty messed up, but this idea does kind of come back later. Spike accepts Dr. Kelson's philosophy and lets his mother pass and then gives her to the shrine. He then says,
The affection takes away their minds. He's got no mind, he's got no soul.
He's obviously talking about the infected, but this could also apply to Isla. Again, she's slowly losing her mind as the cancer progresses, and he's no longer able to connect with her. It's this philosophy that allows Jamie to cheat on Isla, and it may even be what he tells himself to justify what he's doing. Also, this is coming from a guy who just let the child slowly go away after it seemed like it was acting slightly human. So yeah, I'm not even sure if he truly believes it himself. Spike still hesitates though. He refuses to accept these people are truly gone, which is also something that's reflected in his mother. That comes later in the pregnancy scene, but here we see Spike just won't accept death. This is a big part of the movie and basically his arc. We see that all kind of summed up in the scene, and he pretty much goes through his entire arc in the movie here. He's initially told what to do by his father, but eventually he ignores this and goes against his wishes. He wants a person to survive, but things get worse and worse the longer that it goes on. Eventually he kills them and accepts their death, which is basically what happens with his mother. Immediately after this, we then cut to kids in a classroom singing. Rosie points to the words and is clearly loved in the community, whereas Isla's pushed away. This is the hymn Abide With Me, which was played in the first film when Jim discovered his dead parents. Again, this is an obvious juxtaposition between innocence and violence. From doing something I'm sure we all remember doing at school, we then see kids firing arrows at a mask. They're shown walking along the top of a hill, and it mirrors the way the infected are shown as well. Both could be seen as becoming mindless killers to this world of violence around them. One of the dummies with an arrow through the head also looks similar to the person that Spike's just killed. Either way, it highlights how in this world, you go from a moment of innocence to death in an instant. There's no gradual growth or time to mature, everyone just has to grow up quick, which reflects Jimmy as well. We then get a sign that says, jobs in our community. There's not really much career progression, and kids don't get to sit around talking about movies. They either have to be a hunter, farmer, forager, builder, fisherman, baker, counsellor, seamster, or man on the watchtower. I do find it interesting as well that counsellor is so near the bottom, and it kind of highlights how the members of the council who run things, they're not seen as being as necessary as the others. Most of the people here will have seen firsthand how quickly society can collapse, and thus maintaining and running a government, isn't that important to them. Being a hunter is the most crucial role, and when it kicks off, they're the ones with the skills to survive. Back with Jamie, he says,
There's another killer here if we're lucky.
That, if we're lucky, is pretty much showing that they're wanting to kill. Jamie wants to make it so Spike gets used to it and thus killing becomes easier. It also shows how much mentalities have changed over the last 28 years. In the first film, everyone was desperate to get away from the infected. They'd run, climb over each other, and even abandon their wife because she didn't hit the thumbs up. Now though, people actually seek out encounters because it separates the men from the boys. However, things quickly change, and Jamie realizes that he's not the alpha in this land. They find a deer carcass, which Spike's disgusted by. Jamie just laughs at it because in this world, eventually men just become apathetic. He even says I weirdly like it, which it might be either because he's showing his bravado or he's just at home in this world. I weirdly like it.
I weirdly like it.
Shortly after they discover the beheaded deer and the spine in the tree left by the alpha, this clearly isn't a mindless act of violence. It's definitely been done with intention, and again shows how the infected, or at least the alphas, aren't just brain-dead zombies. Why they do this isn't clear, but it could be as a mark of their territory. It notifies Jamie about the alpha's presence, so is perhaps a warning to leave. We also know there's a few different alphas in the area, so perhaps it does this to keep the others off their land. Boyle and Garland said this is like a dog arranging their toys, and you get the feeling here that it's just being placed to strike fear. However, son, let's gun! And that kind of takes us into the different types of infected that exist within the land. The first of these are the alpha infected, who are basically rage on steroids. Like literally. Don't know who this dog is, probably one of the stupid ones from Screen Crush. Get the hell out of here. The virus mutated though and acted almost like a growth hormone, which increased their height and muscles. And also something else. Yeah, he's got a massive dick, hasn't he? Yes, this movie confirms that British zombies have the biggest dicks. I don't know whether to run away or admire his cock. What?
It is miraculous.
Now, but for this, they had to use prosthetics, and rightly so because, you know, they were filming around kids. These alphas seem to have extended abilities though, beyond just being able to direct and manage the infected. At one point, it even appears like some control and murder of crows. This further ties into that one from before. They also have the stampede of deer, which may have been set off by the alpha. Now, I've done as much research into this as possible, and there's a more, let's say, rational explanation. This says that the deer react to the alpha out of fear, and this is why they run away in herds. Crows are also scavengers, so they may be waiting for the alpha to kill so they can then pick off the scraps. They'd obviously stalk and follow the targets closely, and in turn, this would alert the alpha to where people are hiding out. What they can command though are the other infected, and we see the ones in the hills waiting for the alpha's command. Alphas also seem to be more interested in straight up killing their prey rather than passing on the virus. Their modus operandi also involves twisting the heads and pulling out the spines, which we see with both the deer and soldiers. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the first generation. These are pretty much people that have been around since the second outbreak or were infected with that original strain. Because of this, they're normally incredibly skinny and appear completely naked. Their clothes have decayed and rotted away, and now they wander the wasteland looking for nourishment. They appear much like the skinny dying ones at the end of the first film, and this is the type that we see near the Angel of the North. They don't really have much sense of self-preservation and eventually die either due to thirst or simply just a lack of food. Beyond this, we also have the Berserkers, who are sort of a mix between the two. Like the original variant, they're filled with rage and will chase after their prey and try and infect them. However, unlike the other kind, these will actually also seek out food. They also hunt like animals and are pretty much in line with a wild animal themselves. Unlike the original strain, they also don't bleed from their eyes. Lastly, we have the slow-mos, who are the ones we mentioned before. Now, Jamie, immediately senses the danger and wants to head home. Spike's got his kills, and the presence of an alpha is way too much danger. It also kind of shows the hunt sort of performative. He later lies about the ones they killed, and when they're faced with something beyond a slow-lo or a guy tied up, time to leave. We then see the infected coming over the hill, which is where they wait for the alpha's command. Interestingly, the alpha only gets them to attack after they turn their back and run. This is similar to the behavior of wild predators like lions, wolves, and bears, and it highlights their more animalistic nature. As they run across the field, there's some swooping drone shots, similar to the ones when Don escaped the house in 28 weeks. Though it was a close call and they're nowhere near home, Jamie still laughs and shows he actually enjoys this. I can't imagine when you're just living life locked down on an island that a bit of excitement would make you feel really alive. During this, we get a shot of the masks as the islanders begin setting up the party. They just stand still as the rest bring in their plates, and it seems a bit weird, mate. Perhaps this is symbolic of how the islanders live their normal lives while the infected/mainland constantly looms over them. During this, we also get a banner that says, "For we may, but go we must. This plays into how, despite the fall of the UK, the islanders keep going. We then see a group of boys heading back from archery training. They have the infected dummies atop a hill, resembling the Alpha and his group by the tree. Like the masks, they show how the threat of the infected is always looming over them. They live out this cushy little life on the island though, but the threat still remains. Ever present. Ooh.
It's waiting.
Now, watching the Alpha on the hill is such a creepy scene, and it reminds me a lot of Signs. It's just standing there, ominously, probably swinging its stick, and waiting for when they're gonna leave. They also see the quarantine patrol boat out at sea. It's reminiscent of the plane flying overhead in the first film, and is the rest of the world keeping surveillance on the island. Jamie says they're probably French, and they're of course just over the channel. I do kind of wonder what's going on with Ireland though. The images of the UK show it's part of the quarantine, but yeah, I don't know how it would have crossed the sea. Also know that them being French kind of contradicts the idea of the Swedish patrol boat, but we do know they crashed in Scotland, so probably made their way down. Which would also explain the night vision goggle stuff. The boat might even be looking for them, which is why it's shining its spotlight on the water. This is coupled with the other light we see on the other side of the house. Spike asks about the fire set by Kelson, and symbolically it acts as a light in the darkness. Spike then has his dream, and we also see Jamie throwing a stone into the sea. This is next to a pile of stones, which in some cultures represents death. The deer then run by the house, which causes it to start to collapse. Shoutouts to our editor John for pointing out that this might also be a tactical move by the Alpha to herd them to the house, and then send the deer to trap them or make them leave. Forced to run back to the island, we get an absolutely incredible chase. Akin to the rats ushering in the infected in the first film, we see the birds flying overhead. The music and visuals of this scene have a dreamlike quality, and it reminds me of the euphoria in the opening scene in the church. The northern lights are also visible due to the lack of lights coming from the mainland. They desperately race across the causeway and have to wrestle with the tide that hasn't gone out yet. The Alpha is then killed by the group of people on the watch, but it's a massive effort. Earlier, Jamie said it would take 10 men to kill just one, and we see how difficult that is firsthand. Jenny's also reluctant to let them in until she sees both their eyes. This echoes the scene from earlier in which she said they'd be on their own and they refuse to let anyone in unless they're sure.
Wait!
Now this takes us to the party, and you kind of see the tonal whiplash you'd have from living in this world. The opening of 28 Weeks Later was like absolutely incredible because we had that intimate moment with a man and wife before then meeting the other survivors. Things then kicked off and everything went to hell. On the flip side with this, you have the insane chase that's then coupled with a party. We then get the Bladen races, which I'm sure everyone from Newcastle will recognise. My granddad, right, he actually used to always play this on the harmonica, and when he was on his deathbed, he was pretty unresponsive, but then we started playing this, and when it got to the, I remember him sitting up and actually doing that. So it's quite an important moment to me, and just seeing that on screen, you know, it meant quite a lot. You might also notice the Newcastle away strip under the accordion, which is actually a strip that I had as a kid. We also have Queen Elizabeth on the wall. Huge shout-outs to Mad Morph Movie Club for pointing out this is actually an image of her in her 50s. It further forces the idea that we've gone back in time. In the original, we learn she was evacuated from the UK and survived both films. This movie is actually set in 2030, and it's unlikely they know she passed. Jamie then calls them Billy Big Bollocks, which is a bit of Geordie slang. The frisbees are thrown, everyone's subscribing, they're just having a great night. Spike's then hoisted up in a chair and encouraged to drink alcohol. It's pretty much like a Geordie tradition to drink when you're 12, so yeah. Carrying that on, Jamie then cheats with Rosie, which Spike ends up seeing. For him, this is the breaking point. He's having dreams about his mum dying, whereas with his dad, it seems like he couldn't care less. He didn't even check on her after coming back from the party, and yeah, he's just off living his best life. Intercut with this party and Spike leaving are also shots of the infected mask. This further hammers home how the islanders party on while the threat of the infected's ever present. Spike leaving the party also shows how he's rejecting the way of the island and basically going off to do his own thing. Now here, Spike tells the truth of what happened on the mainland. Between his ill mother and his emotionally neglectful father, you can tell Spike doesn't really have anyone he can open up to. Sam tells him about Kelson and the fire, which his dad previously omitted. This further solidifies his contempt for his dad because he knows there's a doctor, but he refuses to seek him out. We then get Whitley Bay mentioned. Salute! Now, when he said Whitley Bay in the cinema, everyone around me cheered. And that's not like a, and then everyone cheered kind of story, like everyone cheered for real. Sam then mentions how Kelson was his GP, but won't say more because Jamie wouldn't want that. Spike then sends him off to the party and he'll watch Isla, which shows he's taking the responsibility as caregiver. In the morning, Isla then asks Spike to go to the shop for some Nurofen, showing how she's losing her grip on reality due to the cancer. In her previous life, he could have just popped to the shop and got that and some Bombay mix for his mum and dad like I used to do. During this though, we get a shot of some streets and you might even notice people walking along them, which kinda highlights the old world. We then get a shot of rundown and dilapidated houses as Isla realizes how the world actually is. Jamie then returns home after what's likely a night with Rosie trimming the rose bush, and you can tell he's got no love left for Isla. Spike confronts him about Dr. Kelson and he tells him he's gone insane. Obviously though, we see it's a bit more complicated. From his point of view though, he's actually the most sane person in the UK as he's accepted how things are and is living on the land. He hasn't deluded himself into like some Teletubbies fantasy sort of thing. While the islanders hide away and party, he sees himself as part of the land that creates tributes to the dead. People deal with things in different ways, including Jimmy, who kind of sees it like a Power Rangers episode. Jamie then tells Spike when they saw Kelson and all the lines of bodies. We later learn Kelson's philosophy of death is very much a celebration of life. Even when he waved them over, Jamie was too scared to interact with them. Which yeah, you can kind of understand. However, this kind of links to his lies at the party. The truth doesn't matter to Jamie, just the perceived one. Spike then asks Jamie if he wants Isla to die, and though he insists he doesn't, he does this with his back turned. I think a part of him does indeed want things to be over, and he resents her for being sick. In this world, death tends to be something that happens incredibly fast, and you just move on. In our breakdown of the first film, you might remember that we talked about how Selena was an embodiment of that mentality. She killed Mark at the beginning, and one of the original endings had a similar motif. Jim originally died in the hospital, and then Selena and Hannah left and simply just moved on. There was no tears, no time to grieve, no funeral, they just moved on. Isla's death's extremely dragged out though, and they're all stuck in a state of misery. He then brings up Rosie, and Jamie then hits him.
If she dies, are you gonna be with Rosie?
Watch your mouth.
What would her Davy think about
I said, watch your bloody mouth!
You can see he regrets it, but the damage has been done. This is an embodiment of rage, and it manifests later when he punches a hole in the wall. In the original prequel comics, they even explain they were trying to cure rage because it's something that we can't really get a grip on. Things like road rage, punching a wall, even though we know it's going to hurt and could be bad, we do it because it's rage manifesting within us. We can't take a step back though and see that it's wrong, even though if we were being rational, we'd know that it was. So the scientists wanted to see what triggers rage and then remove that from our brain. It's moments like this though that show it exists within us all. Now throughout the first third of the film, he seems like a good guy. He's a bit emotionally neglectful, and though he's violent, we still see him as a good man. Here though, it highlights he's more complicated and that shine's starting to wear off. Hitting his son, cheating on his wife, they're all things that make him much more complicated. And yet, he's completely relatable. We all have that side of us that can do dark things, and deep down, I think he cares for his family. He just knows things will never be the same. Spike then goes to comfort his mother, and when Jamie follows, he tells him to get the fuck away. Earlier, he told his dad not to swear at the party, so it shows how far he's willing to go here. He even pulls a knife on him. Jamie is of course a skilled hunter and he easily snatches it away. Shakily though, he gives it back and it's kind of showing the rage that's bubbling within him. He even makes a fist before calming down. Leaving, this is the final straw for Spike and he knows that his dad's never getting his mother help. Now Spike starts a fire to distract the guards in the tower. He then sneaks across to the mainland with his mother. Spike crosses this at several points in the movie, and all of them represent a change in the character. The first time was as a hunter under the wing of his father, and now he's going out as a protector of his mother. Come the third time, he drops off the baby and acts sort of like a protective father. Here, it's the first active choice he's made, and he accepts his role as the caregiver. Now, it's not until they reach the top of the hill that Isla comes to and realizes they're not on the mainland. She's scared of the danger and calls for Jamie, which is really tragic because Spike knows he's not interested in helping her at all. Calming her down, they then head to the doctor, and it's here we witness one of the landmarks. Also, shout out to Lawrence, our editor, who basically pointed out this entire movie is like about how difficult it is to get an appointment with a GP. Now in the film, the pair go past Sycamore Gap. This tree stood for hundreds of years, but it was cut down in 2023. Daniel Graham and Adam Carruthers snuck onto the site in the middle of the night and cut down the tree using a chainsaw. And people were pissed. I remember this being all over Facebook, and even myself, I was like, I can't believe some fucking dickheads have done it. People from all around the area would pop down to see it, and a company that I work for once even had it as their logo. It really was a beautiful tree, and yeah, the outcry was pretty big.
This is our 9/11.
Like, people were out for blood. And in the movie about rage, you know, it's a subtle little reminder. When this popped up on screen, it's like the only time I've been in the cinema where people have gone, oh, en masse. The pair gave pleas of not guilty, but were pretty much banged to rights. Not only did they both put their phone on airplane mode when they were getting close to the tree, but they also filmed a 2-minute video cutting it down. The pair had experience in tree felling and were found guilty of causing 600 grand of criminal damage. So seeing this tree in the film kind of has a different meaning if you're local, as in this world it never got cut down. Boyle actually digitally inserted it as this was cut down before they started filming. And yeah, it's just a reminder of what used to exist in the area. Now we then see a quote that says, "Behold, he is coming with the clouds." However, Jimmy has been scratched into the wall instead. This is a direct quote from Revelations 1:7. It emphasizes the return of Jesus Christ, who will bring salvation at the end of the world. However, with this being changed to Jimmy, it of course perverts that. Sort of plays into his role as an antichrist type figure, and also foreshadows him saying it to Spike at the end. Jimmy's full name is Jimmy Crystal, and Jimmy Savile was also connected to the church, and several higher figures. They then make their way across the landscape and decide to spend the night in an abandoned abbey. This is Fountains Church, which was used in the climax of The Omen 3. This is of course notable due to all the other religious imagery present in the movie. It's dilapidated and decaying, which could tie into the whole Jimmy thing, especially as it follows the previous scene with the writing on the house. While resting, Isla asks if Jamie's silly with Spike and he says no. This is another example of how Jamie's forced Spike to grow up too quickly. Like, he won't even have a laugh with his son. Isla talks about how her father was outwardly stoic to everyone but her. Spike says his dad isn't like that, and Isla says he just wants him to be tough. Isla says when she looks at Spike, she sees her father's eyes. This explains why she mistakes him for her father throughout the film, but beyond that, it has a symbolic meaning. Spike takes on the fatherly role in the family and looks after Isla just like her dad did. He also drops off the baby and is forced to become the man of the house. When Spike tells her to get some sleep, we watch as she even mockingly calls him dad.
You should get some sleep. I'm gonna stay awake. Keep watch. Okay, Dad.
This sort of mirrors the scene from the first film where Jim had a nightmare at the ruins. Frank comforted him and he called him dad, and it kind of reflects how father figures are seen as providing security. The film flipped that with Frank's transformation, and then we had the same thing with Don in the sequel. Now as they fall asleep, we see as a slow-low approaches. Before it arrives, we see birds flying overhead, again likely waiting to feast off the scraps. It does show restraint though, and seems more interested in eating Spike's shoelaces, which it thinks is a worm. Failing this, it then puts its focus on Spike, but waits until it's close enough to do a killing blow. Though it could bite his leg and infect him, he'll just get up and run away, and it won't be able to feast. So it has to have a killing stroke. Isla then smashes its head in like the like button, and she sort of snaps out of her delirium. It highlights that Spike isn't quite ready to protect her, and how her maternal instincts will always prevail in the end. This is something we also get more on later with the train. And don't call me moron. Come the morning, she's clearly forgotten it, and I think anyone who's dealt with someone with Alzheimer's will instantly relate to this. Kind of marks the end of the first act, and from here we meet some brand new characters.
Now, those are Eric and his band of soldiers. If you go to the website Rage Leaks and enter the password Memento Mori, you can access lots of different things. This includes one of the last messages from the ship.
Mayday, mayday. The Otisone survivors, we're still here. We're trying to stay away from the shore, but this... It isn't strong enough, barely keeping us where we are, so if you wanted to send a rescue ship, now would be a really great time.
We also have things like an email chronicling the alpha variant and how people don't believe that they're real. There's even a message request for photos to prove something concrete. We also have an Instagram post where a woman begs for information on her boyfriend. He's part of the team and probably gets torn up in the scene. Yay! Cutting to the alpha overlooking a lake, we see as he's stalking the group. Obviously, horrors need to have a body count, and yeah, you can't just have everyone constantly surviving the infected. It just kinda lessens the threat, so we need to see how dangerous the infected are. And what a better way to do it! They're funneled into a dam and tunnel with many getting picked off by the infected. Again, I suspect this is a tactical move by the alpha, and he's basically herding them to a place he can use to his advantage. It's very dark, cramped, and yet even the lead up to it's somewhere you can't really climb out of. This happens at Kielderwater Spillway, which is located in Northumberland, and you couldn't just walk to the Angel of the North from there, or put it that way. The soldiers are out of their depth though, and clearly haven't had the training to fight the infected. Even with their guns and gear, Jamie and Spike killed more with bows and arrows. Cause the Geordies are the best! The tunnel scene feels reminiscent of the one in Days, but here they're cornered with no chance of escape. Well, I say that, but when Samson arrive, only Eric manages to get it out, and it's here that we also see the infected in their day-to-day. Residing by a stream, this is a behaviour that's typical of animals. They'll often either go there to wash or drink, which is what we see the infected doing. We also have a pregnant infected, which raises one of two questions. The first is whether she got pregnant before becoming infected, or if the infected are capable of reproducing. Later on the train, you could easily take it that Samson's the father, and he may even pursue them to get his baby back. Samson comes from the Bible, and the character looks the same as the figure. Samson was extremely strong, and he fought against the Philistines, which might mirror how he fights against the survivors. At the party, the people also sing Delilah by Tom Jones. Delilah comes from the story of Samson, and she's the person who cut his hair and took away his strength. The people go to the mainland as part of their ritual, and even though they've searched the houses hundreds of times, they still go back there. So you could see these as being like the Philistines in the Bible that arrived and attacked Samson and his people. To him, it's his land, and they're constantly stepping on it and just going too far. Taking his baby could be, seen as the next big step, and this is why he constantly pursues them and seems to have more of a grudge. Because yes, Samson and Delilah, it seems like a big coincidence, especially as Delilah's the one that took away his powers, but moving on. Due to her having clothes though, I always took it as her being recently infected, and that she was probably pregnant before it. But I'd obviously love to hear your thoughts, and yeah, we may get it cleared up in a sequel. Now that takes us to the Angel of the North, which is a major landmark in the area. Built in part to commemorate the industrial past of Newcastle, it was erected as we transition from the industrial age to the age of information. I think if you were alive around the turn of the millennium, then you'll no doubt remember it being put up. The hilltop side is important and has the feeling of being a megalithic mound. When you think of the mining that was done underneath the site, there's a poetic resonance. Men work beneath the surface in the dark. Now in the light, there's a celebration of the industry. What's interesting as well is that the virus turned back the clock. People were forced back into like that 18/1900s way of life. Islet talks about time travel, and you can think of that with going to the future or also going to the past. Angels obviously have ties to religion, and the monument obviously also has a crucifixion pose. To me, it represents a guardian, which is seen not only in Spike, but also the memories that it triggers for Isla. She recalls spending time here with her dad, and it acts almost like a time machine that takes her back to when she was with him. Her father said it would stand forever like the pyramids or Stonehenge, and now it does as a symbol of a lost civilization. Her nose bleeds as well, and she also loses herself a bit, which echoes the blood coming from the infected. We then see not Cillian Murphy. Everyone watched the trailer, and thought it was him, but Boyle just cast him because, he thought he looked interesting. Played by Angus Neal, Boyle put him in the part because of his very distinctive appearance. He lets out a scream which alerts you they're infected, and the pair then flee to a petrol station. Now, we did try and shoot some stuff at the petrol station, but it's since been fenced off and further boarded up. This is Nosegate Petrol Station, which was dressed up with a canopy for the movie. An old shell one, they've removed the S to make it say Hell, which is a nice touch. It's similar to the help sign in the first film, and again ties into the religious themes. It's got a red happy eater sign as well, which may play into the whole infected zombie thing eating people. To reach that, I'll admit it. Happy Eater was a chain in the UK though, before it was then changed to Little Chef. It also represents a bygone era in England and sort of feels like a step into the past. We see how Spike's slowly improving as well as he doesn't miss his shots. Hiding inside, we can see the petrol's been leaking through and the locations basked in fumes from the tanks. Overrun, they're saved by Eric, who lights up this layer of gas. The heat rises, so that's why they're safe to duck below the explosion, which I don't know if that would work. Also, hell ends up on fire, so yeah, that's fitting. Finally meeting Eric though, he makes it clear they should leave Isla behind. However, she says thank you daddy and is obviously lost in time. But Spike's taking on this active role and the group then head off together. Kinda while learning how normal the rest of the world is as well, and Eric even has an iPhone. You could make a movie on that, mate. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the phrase about how if a lion could speak English, you still wouldn't understand it. What it means is basically that the animal's terms of references, its phrases and so on, they'd be so detached from what we understand that we wouldn't get what they're talking about. And I feel that in Spike's conversation with Eric. Spike can't understand what's up with his girlfriend's lips, but at the moment, they're all filler and no killer.
What's wrong with her face?
Which yeah, every one of us sat with laughed at. And the whole crowd cheered. It kind of shows how disconnected they really are from the rest of the world, and that the rest of the world's just carried on as usual. This was something Farrell mentioned in the original, and he theorized everyone in America was tucked up in bed and had probably just been watching The Simpsons. I kind of imagine it's like when you hear about one of those islands that's never been contacted by outsiders. The people there wouldn't really understand things outside their home, and that's kind of just how I assume what people in England would be like. Alex Garland even said there's atrocities and war happening every day, and we're all sat around waiting for our Amazon parcels. And if it's 5 minutes late, I'm kicking off. But yeah, even today, like my internet's down and I'm like stressing out about being like, how am I going to do things? But the rest of the world, that there'll be war-torn countries, people living in poverty, you know, we're very blessed. And yeah, our life just carries on as usual while they're going through hell. Eric explains though that once you set foot on the UK, you cannot leave. This could be symbolic of how once Spike stepped onto the mainland, he became forever changed. Kind of playing off that notion of how you can never really go home. Isla calls Spike dad again, and Eric questions it, saying how he knows there's probably inbreeding in these parts, but that they seem unlikely. Eric really adds a lot of levity to the movie, and is kind of a fish out of water that alters the tone. If we're using Isla's phrasing, he's allowed to be silly because he hasn't grown up in this world. As they head off, they then discuss the alphas, and Eric says it makes him sound like a Wall Street guy. Berserker is a better term to him, but in turn, it makes them sound like Viking warriors. Coming from Sweden, you know, they obviously have a culture built up around that, and would probably call them that if the outbreak happened there. They look like that as well, and it kind of plays into the themes of how Holy Island was stormed originally. I do wonder if that'll be a big plot point in the future sequels, and they may storm the island down the line. Isla's then drawn to the train by the sound of the infected woman giving birth. This further plays into her maternal instincts, and we get a throwback to days as well. As she enters, rats run out, which is akin to them running through the tunnel in the original. Isla calms the infected and coaches her through the birth, showing a lot more care and empathy than Jamie ever did. Similar to Spike, she shares a sort of reluctance to kill her like Spike with the one in the house. The fact that the infected accepts this coaching instead of just attacking is another example of higher brain function. I do wonder if the rage hormone in her head's being overpowered at this point by the other endorphins kicking in. Thus she's able to give birth and concentrate on the moment. It's a stark contrast to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, where they had a similar scene. Another surprise is that, unlike there, the baby isn't infected. Dr. Kelson later posits that the placenta acted as a barrier to the infection, which works in line with real-world biology. The placenta acts as a filter and prevents viruses and infections from reaching the fetus. So it makes sense. Babies are also basically the ultimate symbol of innocence. However, the fact it was born from an infected is incredibly notable. If not for the characters being there to put down the mother immediately afterwards, it would have likely been infected or killed immediately after being born. So this is them managing to preserve innocence in a world that strips it away. Isla's also mentally present throughout all of this as well. Deep down, her maternal instincts kick in once more and overpower the disease, much like we see with the mother. After the birth, the mother then returns to her violent tendencies and is quickly put down by Eric. Birds then fly, which signals the approach of Samson. Eric then demands that they put down the baby or he'll shoot, which is when Samson pulls him through the gap in the roof. I don't think Samson literally did this to save the baby, but I think symbolically it's an example of a father saving their child. The film could even be seen as centering around two families where both mothers die and then the father goes looking for the child. As mentioned earlier, I think you could easily read this as where Samson's the dad, which might be the case now I think about it. I'm sorry for saying it wasn't before. I'm an idiot, what can I say? He then stops during the chase to look at the mother and after realizing she's dead, just throws her to the ground in anger. Which leads me to think there was some attachment. It's possible he even has multiple breeding partners, which is what you get with alpha gorillas. Bro's packing 28 inches later.
Get off the mat! No!
It's here that we then meet Dr. Kelson. He stops Samson with a morphine blowpipe, and even though he has him at his mercy, Kelson doesn't kill him. I think he sees all life as being precious and something that should be respected in all its forms. This is an opposite to Jamie, who's been raised to think the more you kill, the easier that killing gets. Now this is sort of a flip on the original. If you watched our breakdown of that, you might remember how it shared a lot of similarities to Apocalypse Now. Based on Heart of Darkness, that story is sort of a road trip through humanity where every stop shows a different side to it. At the heart is, well, darkness, which was embodied in Colonel Kurtz. 28 days later had Major Henry West, who'd also given into the darkness. On the flip side of this, we have Kelson. He's clearly really similar to Kurtz as well, but his baser instincts are much more positive. Doctors have to take the Hippocratic Oath, which basically means that they'll protect life no matter what. Kelson lives with the land and has even painted himself an iodine to halt the virus. He explains that Samson's lived in the area for 3 years, but never gets that close. Although not outright stated, I'd assume that Kelson has been observing and experimenting with the infected for a while. He's a doctor, so I can imagine he'd try and understand the infection. Now, because he's studied treating diseases, he sees the infected as people instead of monsters, which is a stark contrast to the mask rituals on the island. He then takes Eric's head for the bone monument. We learn he's waited 13 years for someone to ask about it, and probably spent the other 15 building it. Called Memento Mori, this means remember death, remember you must die. Every skull is a set of thoughts, these sockets saw, and these jaws spoken swallowed. While exceptionally grim, it isn't a monument to death, but more a monument to life. The use of the word temple is also very religiously coded. It reminds me a lot of the Cambodian Genocide Memorial, and this actually inspired parts of the original. Whereas that highlighted the horror, here it's a much more positive monument. He worships life through accepting death and thinks life is precious because it comes to an end. He sees beauty in that and thinks everything's important. Spike accidentally knocks some of the skulls down, but Kelson insists they're not precious in that way. Time and the elements will take them down eventually, again linking into the inevitability of death, as opposed to like the Angel of North. This is meant to exist for a short period of time, thus the Memento Mori is actualized. He then takes Eric's skull, burns the flesh and purifies it while Isla walks around the monument with the baby. Here we have a dying mother and a newborn child, and a pile of skulls, which is fairly on the nose imagery. I think it's here that she herself begins to accept death and sees this as a place to be memorialized. We also get Kelson say,
Alas, poor Eric.
which is obviously a reference to Alas, poor Yorick from Hamlet. But Spike doesn't get it, obviously. They've got Power Rangers, but not Shakespeare. Makes me sick. Nah, I'm the same to be fair, mate. Kelson examines Isla and then determines she has cancer and that's spread to her brain. He asks Isla to describe her phases of confusion and consciousness, and she says they're like waves, but the tide's now coming in. This evokes the nightmare Spike had earlier and how she's drowning. Symbolically, the island kept her safe, but eventually that tide would have come in. I do wonder if this foreshadows the attack, and maybe Jimmy will learn of it and try and take it over himself. Isla says she suspected she had cancer, but didn't have the heart to tell Spike, and nobody else would. This is another example of Jamie's neglect and how he shut it away rather than dealing with it. He concludes that she'll die soon, and that in this world, cancer's impossible to treat, especially with how far along that it is. Spike hugs his mum, and then Kelson blows a dart at him, which is nice, I suppose. Isla then hands him the baby and the pair hug. We get the phrase memento amoris, which means remember you must love. Kelson is basically giving her a peaceful death, which in this world's a blessing. She's surrounded by someone who loves her and will be remembered on the shrine. Kelson then shoots her with a high dose of morphine. Images of the mother and son are intercut with shots of the baby and flames circling up the monument. The inclusion of the child also shows how Isla will live on through baby Isla. Even though she's not biologically her, it was her kindness that allowed the baby to survive. We get the fire spinning around the monument, and this creates a burning circle and loop. Gives the idea of life being cyclical, and then we transition into a magnifying glass. Spike then finds a place for Isla's skull, and Kelson says that it's best while warm. To him, this is basically saying it's more important to confront the grief and accept it while it's still fresh. He then climbs the tower, which is symbolism for his growth, and he places her at the top. Spike has officially become an adult, lost his innocence through the loss of his mother, and now fully carries the responsibility to care for another. Rather than being tragic though, it's euphoric and beautiful. While Jamie pushed Spike towards adulthood through instruction, Isla left him to grow on his own. The sun rises as soon as he places her down, signaling the beginning of this new chapter, which is such an amazing moment. And these new 28 years later popcorn buckets, mate, they're wild. Spike and Kelson then hide in a little bunker as Samson approaches. The guy wants his baby back, if it's his, and I do wonder if this will take him to the island. If he is the daddy, then that kind of juxtaposes Jamie, who wouldn't leave the island to go after his son. Even the way he attacks Kelson here is a level he hasn't gone to before. So him moving hell and earth to get to the island to take his kid, that could play off how Jamie refused to leave his sanctuary. He then tries to grab Kelson through the ceiling, but Spike stops him with a dart. This is a small and apparently inconsequential moment, but it shows how Spike's now able to fully take care of others. Kelson concludes though that it's time for them to go home. Though it was difficult getting there, returning is super easy, barely an inconvenience. This emphasizes the fact though that Spike's very capable. Leaving the baby at the gate, he's able to sneak past the watchers. We end with Spike writing a letter for his dad, in which he explains that he's not coming back. Over the top of this, we can hear the music from the first film when Jim was initially making his way through London. Out in the wilderness, he hears some people, which is clearly Jimmy and the gang loving the apocalypse. He shoots some infected, but is then overrun and backed into a corner. You might also notice that one of the infected eats the fish instead of chasing him, which is another example of the infected ignoring people. We then get what's probably the biggest tonal shift I've ever seen in a movie. It was like that bit in the studio where they say the Ron Howard movie was the greatest film ever made, and then they've got like another 40 minutes. I do wonder how they'll handle this next time though, but yeah, it's gonna add some interesting dynamics, I know that for sure. Casting your mind back to the start of the movie, you might also remember that Spike left his Power Ranger figure behind. However, these arriving like this kinda plays off the group. Whereas Spike was forced to grow up quick, these guys have never left their childhood. Jack O'Connell also comes across from Sinners, and he asks for permission to help before stepping in. In Sinners earlier in the years, he was a vampire as well, and he also had to ask to be invited in. In our breakdown of that, we talked about how it symbolized you have to let evil in and accept the devil's corruption. That's a similar thing here, and due to the connection to Savile, it definitely feels like there's a sinister side. However, it's important to know that Savile wasn't outed in this timeline, and Jimmy just picked him because he was a prominent figure. I do wonder if they're even going to discover it, and maybe Jimmy will be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have picked that guy, maybe I'm a bad guy. Or maybe our knowledge of Savile in real life, that'll make us project things onto Jimmy and distrust him throughout the movie and basically have a preconceived notion of him. I definitely think it's something that they've done on purpose for a reason, and yeah, knowing the history, yeah, it's got something behind it, I feel. I feel like Jimmy, though, he represents how some people cope in this world, and you could see him as never really tackling the truth of the virus. Even as a kid, he was just put in front of the telly while the apocalypse was happening outside. His dad then told him it was a biblical event, and thus he never really faced things head on. The Teletubby sound effects plays Hey Jump Down and Attack, which brings things full circle from the opening. They flip around and laugh while fighting, and clear they enjoy it and revel in the violence. It's a bit sadistic.
Go get 'em, Scouts!
Spike has left his childhood behind, whereas Jimmy's still stuck inside his. Spike then shakes Jimmy's hand and he says,
Let's be pals.
They actually also used archival audio of Cillian Murphy saying hello to misdirect the audience.
Hello?
It's also possible that the main Jimmy they go and see is Jim that we met in the first film. Danny Boyle's already Danny spoiled that he's going to be in the second film at the end, and I can imagine that this cult might even be built up around him. Jim even wore a black tracksuit in the first film, which this may be playing off of. Either way, it continues that biblical notion as Jesus went into the desert for 40 days, was confronted by the devil, and yeah, you could see it being a similar thing going down. Juxtaposing Jesus, Spike's made a deal with the devil, and yeah, we'll see next time how this all goes down and plays out. Anyway, that wraps up the video, and thank you for joining me on this breakdown. I'd of course love to hear your thoughts, and if you want to see videos like this early every week, then please donate just 99 cents a month by clicking our join button thing on the video below. Thank you for everyone who does that. It really makes a difference. It means we can just come out here and do stupid stuff like this. Now if you want something else to watch, we've also got a big breakdown on screen, so definitely head over there right after this. With that out of the way, thank you for watching this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.